Alrighty, I think that's probably good enough. We're going to go ahead and get started. So again, thank you everyone so much for taking time out of your busy days to come and hear about our exciting webinar on process simulation. A couple housekeeping notes before we jump in. First one being, if you do have any questions, we will have time at the end for Q&A. So please post them in the Q&A box, not the chat box, just to be sure that we can see them, and we will take those at the end. You will be muted for the duration of the webinar. So if you do have any questions, again, please use the Q&A box. The session is being recorded, so we will send out a copy after the webinar if you want to review it or watch it again. And I think that's just about everything for housekeeping. So let's jump right into it. If I can get there we go. All right, so the presenters today, you can see both of us. I'm Max Smith. I'm a Senior Director of Product Marketing here at iGrafx, and I'm joined by Samuel. Samuel, you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, Max. My name is Samuel Greer, and I am a senior product manager here at iGrafx, and been working with the simulation team to get process simulation brought to you.
Excellent. And just that probably segues well into the agenda, where I'm going to be going through a couple different slides about process simulation, mainly why it's needed, what it can do for you, how it works. And then Samuel's actually going to lead us through a live product demo so you can see how it works in action, which is always my favorite part. Make sure you stick around for that. And at the end, we'll have a quick summary, some notes on availability, how to get it, and then ultimately go to Q&A, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. So starting off with, why is process simulation? What's the need that we saw in the market that led us to creating this product? And it really comes down to businesses know that they need to evolve, they need to adapt. There's new digital native challengers coming into the space. Industries are constantly getting disrupted. But at the end of the day, change is risky. Trying to keep pace is risky, and it's risky for a number of reasons. Number one, for the strategic implications on the business. If you try to release a new product model, enter in a new business model, line of business, it can obviously steer your business one way or the other. These changes also very often come with resource requirements, both in terms of time, people, systems, partners. So there's a cost, and not just the physical cost, but also the opportunity cost. Every time you do something, there's something else you could be doing as well. And then lastly, you almost never have all the information you want or need to feel good about that decision that you're making. So we know that we need to change, but that change is risky. And it's really difficult to mitigate that risk for a number of reasons, a lot of them stemming from that point about not having the data that we want. Usually as we're making change, and particularly change at the process level, there's a number of different factors at play, a number of different variables, and these variables all impact each other. So there's a lot going on, and making one change is rarely ever just making that one change. It can lead to downstream consequences. So maybe you're fixing, or maybe you're addressing a challenge that you have upstream in a process, and you fix that acute challenge, but it has an impact that you weren't expecting downstream. It creates a new bottleneck. So you might lack the visibility to see that. For the most important processes, they're probably the ones that are keeping your business running. So you can't afford to make a change to that process that would cause any sort of downtime if you're a technology business in the cloud, or if you're dealing with patient care or something like that. These are mission critical. So you can't really afford these changes to impact that core business. There might be more than one right answer. Like I said, there's an opportunity cost to every change. And sure, you might be able to make one change that's going to improve, but for the same amount of investment in terms of resources and time, maybe you could have gotten even more out of that change. And then lastly, you're not really sure what the ROI is. You don't have any way to quantify or measure the impact that this change is going to specifically have. So how can process simulation help you solve for those types of changes? At its core, if you effectively use process simulation, you can help your business improve productivity, reduce costs, or mitigate risk. This is at the business level, but also at the specific process level that you're trying to improve. And we can do this through a number of different avenues, or a number of different questions that you might want to ask. It helps with decision support. So that helps answer questions like, if I'm investing in this machine, like let's say we're in manufacturing, I want to buy a new machine to help increase production. What's going to be the return on investment of buying that machine? Or maybe you're considering switching out materials. You have sustainability goals. You want to use recyclable materials instead of your non-recyclable materials. You want to know what's the cost impact of doing that. You also might just be a little bit more curious and open-ended, and you have what if questions that you want to answer. What if I did this? So what if I deployed AI agents in our call center. There's obviously a lot of hype in the market around AI right now, particularly Gen AI. And you're thinking about implementing digital agents or conversational automation. So you want to know what impacts that's going to have on customer satisfaction and things like that. Or what if I reallocate personnel? Maybe it's a slow time for the business. And so some of the people in one department aren't as busy. What happens if I reallocate those personnel to a different department temporarily? It can also help with predictions and projections. So you want to know with the team that I have now, particularly in delivery, how much can my sales go up before I get to a threshold where I'm not going to be able to deliver on all those incoming sales? Or, particularly in something like compliance, maybe you have a backlog of people that you're onboarding that you need to review, make sure they're people you want to do business with. How fast is that backlog going to grow if I remain under resourced like I am currently? And then lastly, you might want to do some root cause analysis. You might want to understand, is the bottleneck that we've identified in our process caused because of something like imbalanced teams or because of other resource constraints? Or what specific steps in the process are causing it to slow down, or what specific steps are going to be impacted if we make a change? So all of these things help you to effectively mitigate the risk around change that we talked about in the last slide and ultimately lead to those benefits that we see on the left. And then I also just want to take a second to contextualize simulation, because this is often not an endeavor that we see companies undertaking in a vacuum. It's part of an overall process improvement initiative or process excellence initiative that businesses have. And it's typically within 3 steps, as we say it. There are different types of frameworks, but that change management process typically works by discovering how your processes run today, identifying what the challenges are, getting visibility, understanding where you can improve, what those opportunities for improvement are, designing the future state of those processes. So after we make a change, what does that look like? What does that new future state look like? What are the teams involved? What are the risk and compliance concerns? Who are the personnel involved? And so on and so forth. And as part of that stage, you can see with the lines highlighted in blue, this is where we typically see simulation fit in the overall process transformation or process improvement process, that it's really helping you understand as you're building that future state, what are the performance gains that we're going to get? Are we going to accidentally violate any regulatory laws or internal policies if we make these changes? So it's helping you say, as we're building that future state, does it make sense in terms of cost, in terms of performance, in terms of compliance? And then lastly, as the final mile of that process improvement, you need to optimize the processes. So you know where you are today, you know where you want to get to. How are we going to close that gap? And so that can involve a lot of different change management programs, technology that you can deploy. But importantly, as part of this step, you also want to monitor what's happening with the processes. So with simulation, you can pretty well validate what the impact of the change you're going to have is, but there might be new challenges that crop up in the middle of your rollout. So you want to make sure you're constantly having a pulse on what's happening, so that you can safeguard against those challenges that crop up. So then how does it work? We've talked about why we did this, what kind of answers it can get you, but how do you actually use simulation? And Samuel's going to go through this in far more detail in the demo. But at its core, there's really 5 simple steps. So the first one is you need to build a simulation model. This is based on a process model. This might be something that you're either going to build from scratch in a process design solution, BPM solution, EBPA, process modeling. People use different words, but you'd either be creating that model, or you might use one that you have existing. So as part of your process improvement journey, you've already been working with, for instance, a partner or a consultant. They might have helped you build these models already. So you can use that as a starting point if you want. Once you have that model of the process, you're then going to configure the simulation parameters. So these are things like, after a certain step in the process, with what probability are we going to go to this step versus this step? Or how long on average does it take this step to complete in the process? So just information like that you need to be able to create kind of your baseline for the simulation. After you have all of those parameters that reflect reality, you run the simulation, and this is going to give you a baseline. And this baseline should be something that you can compare with other sources of information that you might have. whether it's some sort of business intelligence, whether it's process mining, you should be able to get results with the simulation that look very similar to what's happening in reality that you know today. After that, you can start testing your changes. So you can tweak those parameters. What happens if I deploy automation and the time it takes to execute this step of the process gets cut in half? What happens if I add or if I hire 2 more people within the specific team because they seem overwhelmed right now? So you tweak those parameters in the model, you run the simulation, you can see your results, and you're going to keep doing that and repeating that with all of the ideas that you have for how to improve the process, or ideas that you've identified by doing your analysis, or ideas that you've gotten from that partner ecosystem that you're working with. And over on the left, you can see an example of this. Again, Samuel's going to show you this in the product, but you can see kind of what our baseline case is and then how the important metrics get impacted as we test these various hypotheses that we have. This ultimately leads you to a point where you can go to stakeholders or people with budget that have the ability to actually implement this change or invest in what you're proposing. And you can give them a list of, here's what it costs to do this particular change, and here's the impact that we'll see on the back of it. And so this is pretty standard. This is for most simulation products, why they exist, how they work. So I just want to take a quick second to talk about, we're obviously iGrafx, we're doing the webinar. How is our process simulation different from other simulation software or models that you might see in the market? So the first is that we use a different type of simulation than most other companies. We use discrete event simulation. The other common type is Monte Carlo simulation. And the reason why this is important is particularly for time series simulations, which are the types of simulations that you're running for improving processes because they have steps that happen over time. The discrete event simulation is going to be much more accurate. The second thing is that we have a number of settings to let you really customize your simulations to reflect the reality of your business, which is important if you want to have confidence in the simulation. There's really 2 key pieces here, the trends and the scheduling. The trends are, we allow you to use different formulas to express different patterns of activity. Maybe you're in retail. Black Friday comes up in November. You know that sales are going to spike there. So this is something you can model and say, okay, the information that we're looking at is different at different points in the year. And also if you have specific scheduling constraints, maybe you use just a normal work schedule. Maybe you have different shifts. Maybe you have different rules for overtime. Maybe you have different holiday settings for different regions that you're operating in. If you're an international business, all of that you can capture within the system. And so when you say this person's available at this time, again, it'll actually reflect how your business works in reality. The next 2, the contextualized with process modeling and informed by process mining, are part of a greater process intelligence set of tools. So at iGrafx, we offer the Process360 Live platform, which is a process intelligence platform. And so, like I was saying earlier, process simulation doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? You want to contextualize those models that you're running. So you need built out business architecture and business models to say, these are the people associated with the process. These are the systems that make it happen. Here are the risks that we identify, regulatory risks and internal risks. Here are their mitigating controls. Here's how this process maps up to our corporate goals and strategies and the KPIs that it impacts. So all of that context to help understand why is this process important and why are we making this change in the first place? All of that information is there with process modeling that you can help inform the simulation model. With process mining, you can get a very accurate picture of what's happening today. So process mining can give you information like, this is how long this step of the process takes to execute on average. This is the time between steps. These are the probabilities that after this step, step B will happen, step C will happen, step D will happen. And so when you're making these simulation models, obviously they're only as impactful or they're only as real as the data that you're using to put in them and the parameters that you're using to configure them. And so being able to extract this information automatically from systems, one, saves you a lot of time because you don't have to go around and ask a lot of people, how long does this take? But 2, it's much more accurate because it's not someone's subjective opinion. It comes directly from the systems where the work is happening. And then lastly, we've made a serious attempt to make this democratized for everyone. So with a lot of simulation models, there is kind of the very professional, code-heavy, you need to be a data scientist. You need to be able to code to test your hypotheses using simulation. And particularly with this cloud version of process simulation that we have as part of Process 360 Live, we've tried to make this very easy so that you don't have to be a technical analyst or a developer to test the hypotheses that you have. So I think that's enough about me talking about the product. I'm going to hand it over to Samuel so that he can show you how it actually works.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Max. I appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. That should take just a moment. And let's go ahead and get in here. We should be looking at a little demo of pizza. If that's what you're seeing, Max, can you please let me know?
Yeah, you got
Very
it.
good. All right, so here we are. We're in a real live version of Process 360 Live, which is iGrafx's main product suite. And we are looking in our enablement environment. We're just going to get situated for a second here. So if this looks a little different to you, it's because we have a new diagram experience that we've been building, a new front end that's coming out in May to everyone. You can turn it on today if you'd like by just heading into your profile and going to early access and opting in. And this just opts in for you personally, not for everyone on your server. You can turn this on for the server in the normal early access feature flags, but this is just going to kind of align us to what's coming, and it's nice, much nicer, cleaner, modern look. So jumping right in, I'm going to go ahead and start running a simulation here. We're going to jump into trace mode because this is the cool looking one. And let's talk about some terms. So we're going to have a simulation that's going to start up, and we are going to have cases that are going to get generated at the start of our process, and they're going to step through event by event the process that we are modeling. And so here you can see both the cases that are traveling through the process, as well as the status of the cases at each process step. So this pizza demo, pretty simple, pretty straightforward, very readable. Hopefully a little bit of amusement in here for you. I personally happen to like pineapple on my pizza, but then again, I do ponder my life decisions on a regular basis too. So I think it lines up. That said, let's go ahead and jump into a little bit more sophisticated example of what's going on with simulation, where we're at, what we're talking about. So I'm going to jump on over to a claims dashboard here. So in this case, I'm going to take on the role of a head of claims at an insurance company. And in my role as head of claims, I have a couple things that are really important to me. I'm looking at my dashboard. I'm looking at the number of claims that I have coming in on an ongoing basis. And claims have really gone up recently. And this makes sense to me because we ran a big sales promotion last year, and we're just starting to see the result of that. Nothing changed in my department, of course, with the number of employees that we had, even though we were projecting to bring more customers in. And so as the number of claims has gone up, my average claim processing time has steadily increased as well, which is not great. My target here is about 4 days of claim processing time, and I've really been hovering up way in the red, 47 days. Right, this isn't good. So additionally, I've got my appeal resolution time. Now I'm legally obligated to ensure that my appeal is processed within 5 days. These are separate from my claims, or this is after the claim has gone through and a customer is appealing my claim. I have a regulatory step that I need to make sure that I'm managing and keeping this within a 5-day window. And that's kind of been creeping up to an uncomfortable point recently. So we've got to figure out what's happening here as well. And finally, my NPS, or my Net Promoter Score, this is how much customers said they're promoting the company. Really seems like it's been going down recently, which kind of makes sense considering the claims processing time has really gone up. So people are unhappy. We need to look into this. We need to figure out what's going on. But of course, even as I jump into my process to understand what's happening, the reality is I am accountable to justifying any decisions that I need to make. I don't just have a free reign of budget. So I have a hypothesis that the number of claims analysts that I have is too few. I've had 3 of them for the last couple of years. While they're very hardworking, number of claims that are coming in are dramatically increasing. And so I need to make a case to my leadership to justify bringing on more people, how many more people, and justify that it's actually going to solve our problem. And if you look at this process, it's a little bit more involved. It's a little bit more cumbersome, just like any any real process that we deal with in life than our pizza demo. And so claims come in, we generate them at the start of the process, and then they're going to be represented as cases. They're going to flow through our process. And if we look at our process here, we can also see that we have our appeal process that flows through, and we're tracking this to a right to appeal requirement here, where I have a document attached that's focused on my my statutory obligation to manage my appeals timeline. So, all right, I've got my process together because I coordinated with my team. We have something ready to go, but now I need to start telling a compelling story to justify some changes to the department. And the first thing I'm going to go do is, as I try to get a simulation set up to figure out how I'm going to move forwards, is I'm going to head over to my process mining. So I've gone in and I've mined my process. And as I take a look at my mined process, we've got a couple things we're going to lift from this mined activity and just drop right into our simulation to leverage the data set. So something like, for instance, our claim adjustments. There's a number of little spaghetti arrows here floating around. Let's go in, let's take a look, see what's happening. So if we look at our nearby tasks, we can see that we switch to claim denials, medical necessity, claim adjustment, claim approval. Here's the percentages: 23, 14, 9, and 54. And we want to make sure that information gets dropped into, what did we say? This was the claim adjustment process. So let's go over to claim adjustment here. And I'm going to head into my properties, and I'm going to go into my, I need to go into the gateway, of course. and here we go. I have my 54, 23, 9, and 14. So I'm not guessing at this information. I'm going out and collecting it from across the business, and some of that I can just get right from Process360 Live, which is fantastic. Other data that I might be able to bring in, for instance, is going to be my let's say my appeal submission. Let's just go grab my appeal submission. So if I scroll down in my process here, do some task mining. This is on average taking 17 minutes to accomplish. And so if I come back over to our diagram, we're going to take a look at the data I've put in here. I've said 11 to 23 minutes. And this is important because it's a simulation. I want to see, sometimes I have a low value, sometimes I have a high value, and I want to be able to see like what that does to the overall flow of the process over time. So we're going to put that information in here that's the representative of 17 minutes into our timeline. And then we'll go ahead and we'll step into trace mode. Trace mode is the visual way of seeing what's happening and the process. We could just run the simulation and go straight to the results on the outset, and we'll do that at some point in the demo here as well. So now I've stepped into trace mode, and I can speed this thing up. I can slow it down. This is logarithmic, so the higher the number goes, it gets exponentially faster. With that, we can see that we have claims that are coming in, and it looks like everything is going swimmingly at the moment, which is great, because this probably means that I didn't reset my demo. So here we go. This is the joy of live demos. Thank you, everyone. So we'll come in and we'll just see what's happening. I need to recognize that I need to get to my baseline. What is happening today? And so if I come into my claims analyst and I take a look at my claims analyst, I have 3 of these today. That is the number that we would like to see. And if I come in and take a look at my claims supervisors, I have one of these today as well. So I want to get a good baseline run. Let's go ahead. Let's run this again. Now you know where we're headed. So here we go. And so we're going to step into our simulation and we're going to see that our claim validation process is backing up. And this is no surprise to me. This is what I experienced today. And so everything else in the process, though, looks like it's fairly smooth. This seems to be the problem step here on our claim validation. So we've come to the end of the simulation that we've set up, and we're seeing that it's taking 47 days to get through our process. And there's other data in here that we can go take a look through and see what's if we want to dig into the specific processes, activities that we have. So the first thing we want to do is validate against baseline. Do we have a simulation model that is reflective of reality that we can say, we can demonstrate that our understanding of the process is accurately reflected? So we're going to take this 47 days and we're going to come back over to our average claim processing time. And we're going to see, hey, we've got 47 days of claims processing time. It looks like we have a pretty good understanding of what the simulation is looking like today. So, or the process is looking like today. So let's go ahead then. And now what we want to do is make a conjecture. How do we solve this problem? How do we move forwards? How do we reduce the bottleneck? Well, as you saw earlier, I'm going to propose that we just take a quick look at the number of claims analysts that we have. And let's go ahead and let's bump this up to 5 and take a look and see what happens when we run our simulation. And we'll go ahead and hit play here. And the simulation gets started. It looks like claim validation is doing pretty good. So no longer really bottlenecking here. But as we look through the process, we're now starting to see that we are getting backed up a little bit in this claim supervisor line. The claim supervisor here, this is backing up. We're getting claim approvals that are backing up. And importantly, we're seeing a little bit of backup, even though it doesn't look like a ton. We're getting a little bit of backup here in the appeal approval, but this makes me nervous because I'm statutorily obligated to make sure that this occurs in a timely fashion. So we'll go ahead and we'll just complete we can hit the finish button. Look at that. So we're going to go ahead and finish the simulation. And we're going to see that we've improved our process from 47 days down to 39 days. But this really isn't where we want to be. As we said previously, our target's really actually 4 days. 27, 28 days. That's kind of our getting up to the red zone. So this isn't going to be good enough. So my initial hunch of just including a couple more claims analysts is not sufficient. So we could save that run, which is actually what I should have done. So let's just go ahead. We'll take a look. We'll just go ahead and run the simulation all the way through. And I'll just take a moment. And we'll see that we can save our simulation as soon as it finishes. We'll give that a second try. Let's see here. What have I done? So we'll just give that a little refresh. And there it goes. Finish the simulation for us. So just on the front end. We're going to save this simulation, and we'll save this as our demo March more analysts results. And this is going to be important because we want to say, hey, we have a baseline, but now we want to be able to start telling a compelling story. The most obvious solution of just hiring more claims analysts is not satisfactory. It isn't going to do what we need to do. So let's save that result and let's come back and let's continue to work with the simulation a little bit more. So let's go into our resources and let's take a look at our supervisors, which did appear to have a little backup. And let's go ahead and turn this up to 2 supervisors, and let's run our simulation. And we'll just let it process through. There it goes. And it's now bringing us down to 2 days, 17 minutes to process through the simulation. So this brings us well within our target timeline. And we might want to save this as well. So, all right, we could say that this was as our more supers, more analysts. Very good, very good. And now we need to start taking a deeper look at telling a more compelling story. So I've come in, I've looked at a hypothesis. I've now I can go in, I can see some summary results of how do I get to a place that takes me from a baseline of where I'm at 47 days and bring this down to an acceptable result of within my target of 2 days. And I still have to be smart as an analyst here. I still have to think, do I have a way to improve my process? Can I shift tasks away from my supervisor? Can I bring in new technologies or bring in training to improve the process rather than just adding more people? But I look at all of my paths forwards and I make a recommendation to my leadership. As I make a recommendation to my leadership, I have a set of data that I can bring forth that says, if we make one change, it's going to net us a little bit of improvement. But in order to really solve our problem, we need to make a group of changes together to work with the system in its whole. And so we can tell this compelling story. And then we can also, one of the beauties of the trace mode is that it presents really well. And so just being able to show, like, we have a good understanding of what's happening, where it's happening, who's involved, the ability to tell that compelling story is really brought together. All said, we have also taken a look with our appeals review process as we added the new supervisors. We're bringing everything down to that 2-day target. We're good to go on managing our risk for our statutory compliance. So we're in a good place for what we're going to recommend in this scenario. And just to recap a little bit of what we've done, we took a look at our dashboard to understand where we're at, what's going on with our process as the head of claims. And then we integrated data in from our process mining tool to leverage the story to build the model. And then we linked out to our risk and compliance to make sure that we're meeting our obligations. And finally, we built a simulation that successfully allowed us to model how to move forwards and resolve the problem that was in front of us to bring our work that we were responsible for into a timely delivery. And with that, that completes the simulation demo. So I'm going to turn it back over to Max.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Samuel. Always appreciate having you on to walk through that because, like I said, that is for sure the most interesting part. So I just have a couple slides here, a couple being literally 2. Actually, just 1, I think. I lied. I have 1 more slide. And I see some questions already going in the Q&A box. But if you do have additional questions, please do add those to the Q&A box. We are going to have time to go through them, so we'd be more than happy to answer your questions. I guess I do need to actually, can you see my screen?
I can see that you're showing a live product demo iGrafx slide with the Forester Wave Leader. Perfect.
Awesome. Sweet. So in summary for today, although I think Samuel did a pretty good job of summarizing there at the end of the demo, we understand that business change is necessary, but it comes with substantial risk. That's why we created simulation. And simulation can help mitigate that risk by using data from process mining, data that exists in the systems, to be able to build a baseline and then have confidence in quantifying and measuring the impact that it's going to have so that you can, again, de-risk those changes that you're planning to make. And we also understand that process mining is best paired with other process intelligence technology, such as modeling and mining, to help contextualize and give you the data that you need to build a realistic model, respectively. So if you're as excited as I am, your question is probably, okay, well, how do I get this? How do I start using it? So the good news is that right around the corner here, simulation is going to be available in early access next month. And we are at the end of the month now, so that is quite close. If you are a new customer or a prospect, we'll be in touch with a follow-up email to help you learn more. You can request a demo on our website. We can set up an eval environment. We can get this into your hands. If you're an existing customer and you're interested, please reach out to your account rep, and we'll be more than happy to get you set up and start going through the process. One note in particular, so the simulation that we just showed is part of our Process360 Live product, meaning that it's only available in the cloud. There is a desktop simulation version that some of you might have been familiar with from the past, but what you just saw is particularly for the SaaS version of our product. So yeah, I hope you're excited to get started.
And
With that,
Max, I will note we do plan to support the process simulation and our self-hosted version of the product at some point, maybe later this year or next year. But it is on our roadmap.
okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay, jump into the questions. Looks like I missed an important question at the beginning, which was, should we follow along in our own iGrafx instance? Unfortunately, you wouldn't have been able to turn it on because, like I said, it's coming out next month, but that would have been really cool to follow along. That's actually a great idea for a future webinar, Samuel. Let's catalog that one.
Yes.
But then next question, if your processes have a lot of steps that involve email, will that impact the ability to do this? So I think so you could create a simulation model entirely manually. So you could model a process that involves manual steps that happen on the systems, and you could put in the parameters that you want. If you're using something like process mining, you'll be able to get the data out of the core IT systems, but you won't be able to get the data for something like the desktop activity, like an email. Although you could use task mining to accomplish that. That helps with if you're doing copies and pastes from Excel spreadsheets, if you're sending emails or other behavior that happens on the desktop, you can get information from task mining for that. So it will not impact your ability to do this. You can still absolutely do it. But in terms of getting the information to build the model, it gets easier with process mining. It gets easier with task mining. It gets more accurate with both, but it doesn't impede your ability to do this. Roughly how long does it take to set up something like this? I always love this question because there isn't a good answer. Like the real answer is it really depends on the use case. And I hate saying that because it's a non-answer, but if you're looking at something like the claims process, which Samuel was showing, you can see that there's obviously a lot of activity in that model. That's a fairly involved process with a lot of steps. There's a lot of different considerations like the regulatory requirements. And so setting something up like that, modeling it to begin with, doesn't take a ton of time, but is going to take longer than if we were, for instance, setting up the pizza demo that Samuel was showing earlier, that has a more limited number of steps. So I'd say the things that you really need to get started, like the key levers that are going to impact how quickly you can get this set up, are one, how quickly can you get the information you need? So that can come from models. If you have models already built through partners or through other systems or through iGrafx, that's already a huge step forward, right? If you have to build your own, it's going to take some time to do the interviews, make sure you understand it, or set up process mining. If you do use process mining to generate a model, then you need to get the data out of the systems. That is typically pretty easy. You can use an Excel file. You don't need to create like a live connection or anything. You can typically do that pretty quickly, but that is another point if you want to get the data for process mining. And then it's also the ability for the personnel on your end to contribute. So you might be able to get some of the data from process mining, but undoubtedly you're going to have questions for participants in the process. So if a process involves multiple departments, flows through a number of different teams, you need to be able to get their time to answer the questions. Or if it's a relatively self-contained process or it's a sub-process, right? You're not looking at the whole claims process. Maybe you're only looking at the appeals portion of it. That's obviously going to take less time to get filled out. So, I would say for the smallest process, we're talking like a couple days here. For the largest, most complex process, that could maybe be a month, but it really depends on again what's involved here.
Yeah, Max, I think our objective here is we want to make simulation accessible. So we are really looking to make it easier. And that's going to be a back and forth with the market over time to understand like different needs that people have. But we want people to be able to come in that are managers and simulate the processes. And it is complex. There's a lot going on. So these are projects. But at the same time, we do want to make it easy.
Excellent. Next question is, would this be useful for the decommissioning of a system? That would be a use case that you could test using simulation. This is actually where having process modeling or process design is actually very useful, because you would be able to see, if you decommission a system, which processes and which specific process steps are impacted by that system or are run through that system. So you would have a map to understand, which part of the process is getting impacted. And then you could do the same thing. So you say this step can no longer happen in this system, but how is it going to happen? Is it going to be a manual process? Is it going to be automation? Or are you going to use some sort of digital agent? Like, assuming we're just talking about decommissioning a system and not actually re-architecting the process to remove steps, which you could also use simulation for. But if we're just talking about removing a system, you could test, well, what happens if we put in this alternative technology, or this now becomes manual? You would, of course, need the parameters for how long is this going to take. You'd have to be able to, come to a conclusion as to how long you would think that would take, how much it would cost, things like that. But you could absolutely use this model to test something like that. Hi, can we run a process simulation without process mining? You absolutely can. Like I said, you could build a simulation on its own. You could build the model. You could set in the parameters. We do see that it becomes less accurate if you don't have the data from the systems, because then you're asking people how long things take, which is more subjective. That doesn't mean it's not valuable. It can absolutely still be valuable. The specific numbers become a little fuzzier, but the direction of the outcome is correct. So yes, I mean, you can do it without process mining, but process mining absolutely makes it more accurate, and it makes it quicker to set up the simulation model. What is the minimum data requirements to create a simulation?
It's pretty low, but I guess the question is, the real question is, what do we need to model, and what sort of hypothesis do we need to answer? And so minimum data is going to be some sort of generation. How many cases are coming to us? And then how long do the tasks take to accomplish? We're probably going to want to ask other questions like, is there a distribution or a difference in time that the tasks take to accomplish? Simulation is a complex area, but the other side of the coin is, depending on your needs, the questions can be short as well.
Thank you. Another one, just to confirm, simulation is part of Process 360 or Process Design 360 and not process mining, right? So I think the best way to think about this is our overall product is called Process 360 Live. And within that product, there are a number of different capabilities and features and products. Those would be process mining, process modeling, process simulation. Now, those are integrated in specific ways. So you'll note that Samuel was in the design module as he was running the simulation, because it's integrated, because that's where we're contextualizing the model. And similarly, you saw that he went to process mining to pull the information for the simulation. So I'm maybe if there's a more specific question, I can give a more specific answer, but I would say that simulation is a product feature of the Process 360 Live platform and sits alongside design and mining, although they're all integrated, would be my answer, unless there's a more specific question you have.
I'll take this next one, Max. Can Excel feed the generators? Are sheets available for R/W? And at the moment, Excel cannot feed the generators. That is very much in our roadmap. So as we know, releasing to early access. This is our first launch. Absolutely, external data in is very much like that is our current thing that we're working on right now, and we expect that will be available shortly. But we know this is needed. We want to get data in from Excel. We want to get data in directly from our own mining tool. We want to get data in from SQL databases. Wherever you have data, we want to just load that right in. Not a problem.
Do you also want to take the next one as well?
Sure. Do we add costs per tasks or cost for resources? And if yes, what's the currency? So at the moment, we don't have currency specifically built in. This is a feature that we would certainly be open to evaluating. The currency is just currency. So whatever currency you're working with, as far as how you add your costs in, you can add costs for tasks. You can add costs for resources. It's how you want to set this up. Um, we're happy to model. Our objective is to be able to model based on how your business runs. And sometimes that's nice and straightforward and easy. And as many of you know, most of our businesses aren't quite as simple as we would like them to be. There's always exceptions. So really, we can model it the way your business runs.
Excellent. So I do think we are at time here, correct? Gemma, can you just confirm that we were going to end at 12:45?
There is an hour allocated, so if you did want to answer a couple more, there is.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a lot of questions and I love the engagement, so I'm more than happy to stick around for 15 more minutes and answer some questions here. I just didn't want to hold people longer than we promised them.
No, as long as okay.
Excellent. And thank you everyone in the audience. Like this is absolutely phenomenal that you're asking so many questions. Like we love it. So we answered the question about concurrency. Thanks for the demo. Am I right? Assuming the resources you can change in the simulation panel need to be in the process log as an additional column. I'm assuming when you're saying process log, you're referring to the event log that you use to import for process mining. But if I'm not, again, please ask another question. They don't need to be in there. You can just add them directly in the simulation model. If you do have them in your event log for process mining, you can get that information more easily from process mining in terms of identifying how many resources you have, which resources are applied to activities. So you do get a benefit if they're in the event log, but it is by no means necessary to run the simulation. We have a question here about, you don't speak about root cause analysis. What's your position about this topic? So as I mentioned earlier in the simulation, there are a lot of different root cause type questions that you might want to ask. But going back to one that you would have seen in the demo, so we had the question, right, or what Samuel saw as the head of claims was that our cycle time was going up for these claims. It was taking us 47 days to process these instead of our target of 4. And there are many different steps to the process, so you might not know which part of the process is leading to that bottleneck. Some of that information you might be able to get from process mining, but you could see visually when Samuel ran the automation, or ran the simulation, that the claims validation step was the bottleneck. So that is the root cause of our problem. And then when he added the resources to that step, when we added more claims analysts, so that step wasn't the root cause problem anymore. Now the claims denial, claim approval, and appeal denial became the bottleneck. It was really the supervisor. So it's helping to understand what's actually causing the problem to the overall cycle time. And you can see that visually within the process. However, there are multiple other kinds of root cause analysis you could do. For instance, if you associated costs with the resources and you were trying to do an analysis on, what's the most expensive part of my process, like I'm trying to reduce the overall cost of this process because I've been given an executive mandate, you could do that kind of analysis. It really depends on what you're looking for, but you can highlight where those areas are, both visually with what Samuel was showing, as well as that report that he showed at the end. And I guess we didn't really dive into it, but you can see the breakdown by resource, by activity, and you can see, how those pieces impact the overall process. Can all existing process models be imported into simulation? Samuel, I'm gonna give that one to you.
I was going to take it either way. So, yes, simulation is part of the product. I think of this less about being imported into simulation and more about saying if you have a diagram in Process360 Live, you can run a simulation on it. It does not matter if it's BPMN, it does not matter if it's VSM, Archimate, whatever you decide you want to put in the diagram, the simulation engine just it runs it. It requires things like the concept of gateways in terms of understanding, is the flow of a case going up or to the side or down. You need to specify where the cases are traveling, but as long as you can give it kind of the base information of how to navigate the diagram, then it will simulate on top of it.
Maybe jumping too ahead to answer a similar question, can the IGX be imported and executed?
So we cannot take right now diagrams from our desktop client and import those in. So if that is a need, we just need to understand and engage with our community around what the objectives are and what we have. We're certainly open to discussing that further. As far as additional, we have a way of getting IGX diagrams into Process360 Live now. So you could get a diagram and it just wouldn't come over with the simulation variables.
Awesome, thank you. If I were to run, or if I were to export a simulation report, what details does it comprise of? So you could see the overview that Samuel presented. So you can see for this run, what's the overall, I mean, there is a ton of metrics that you can customize to what you want in the report. But just to give some examples, you have the overall cycle time, and that can be a mean as well as a max or a min. Actually, for most of the things I'm about to mention, it can be either a mean, a max, or a min, depending on what you're looking for. You can look at specific activities, the cycle times for those. You can look at the costs associated with the resource or with the activities.
Transition time.
Transition time.
I mean, we've got lots of stats, all the stats. If you don't have enough stats, you let us know and we'll work with you to get them. So not a problem.
I think the primary use case at the end for the simulation report is saying, okay, here are the opportunities that we have in front of us. Like here's what we're changing, and here is the impact in terms of the business value that it provides, either in reduction of cycle time, increase in automation, reduction in costs, whatever it is. But if you're looking for a specific type of report, that isn't covered by those, please let us know and we can look into it. Are attributes and functions available? Yes.
I think attributes are functions from as identified in the desktop client. I think we need to have a little bit more discussion around.
Okay. There are expressions.
Yes, though, expressions are available. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Yes. So there is a way to model variance and distribution for these data elements that we have. I guess the specific need for the function is what we would need to discuss further.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can you list out what data we need for simulating a process? The data you need is some sort of model. Like Samuel said, that could be various types, but the most common we would see would be BPMN. You need the data for the steps. So how long does this activity take? You need the data for the decisions. So what's the probability that this goes one way or another? And you need the information for the resources that support them, which are typically captured in the swim lanes in the model, but you do need the counts of those. I would say that is the minimum data set you would need for simulating a process. And again, all of that is either probably already documented in a model if you have one, or information you can gather from process mining. Do we add a specific number for simulating a particular process so that it simulates that many times?
So I don't know if I fully understand the question here. However, you can set a number of cases that you want to simulate, or you can set a duration that you want to simulate for. So if you want to simulate for a year, 2 weeks, right? If you want to say, hey, I have 5 to 11 claims that come in daily, but I only want a maximum of 5,000 claims. All those things can be set up, not a problem.
Okay. Wow, this is great. There is actually so many questions. I'm just thinking we have 5 minutes here, so maybe we pick. Are you able to share? How about this one? This one's general. Are we able to share a couple more use cases for this? So in general, there are major hypotheses you want to test for processes. They typically involve improving productivity around that process, reducing the cost of the process, or making sure that the process is compliant both with external regulation and internal policy. Those are kind of the three main use cases that we have. In this case, it was actually a blend of them in the demo we gave. It was maintaining compliance with our appeal resolution time that we needed to meet. It was lowering the cycle time, which is improving productivity. It was not about reducing costs in this one, but you could run a similar analysis. You could say, what would happen if I remove one of the claims analysts? Or what would happen if I move one of those claims analysts to a different team and implement automation at this step? So that's kind of the goals. But in terms of like the actual use cases, this could really be for any process that you have. Like you could simulate a sales process, a marketing process, a delivery process, a finance process like accounts payable or accounts receivable. Really, any process that has a set of steps, which is kind of inherent in the definition of a process, right? If you have a set of steps and those steps take some amount of time and are performed by certain resources, you could use simulation. So I would say there's yeah, I don't want to just say everything because again, a non-answer, but like this use case applies around across the business.
Or like another really big one is capital improvement projects, which we need decision support where there's an understanding of if we're going to invest 3 to 5 million or bigger in something, we say we need justification for this. I need confidence that the decision I'm going to make is going to return the results that I need. Whenever you have that sort of scenario, that's when you want a simulation.
Excellent. We do have a question that we're in a value prop analysis to make a decision to implement iGrafx. Can you share some PowerPoint slides? We would be more than happy to share some slides. We will make sure to follow up with you after the webinar. Thank you for asking. Is BPMN required for building a more sophisticated model?
No. BPMN is not required. We can submit it on top of VSM, as I mentioned earlier. As long as you have shapes and you let the engine know how to get through the system, you can simulate. But BPMN is certainly kind of the base thought process that we are working against as building the model for simulation. But it is not the only way to simulate.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Do you find that in terms of compliance as a metric, it can take more resources expense to meet the compliance goal, or are you able to meet with current resourcing? So I don't think there's a general answer to that, but I think that the simulation can help you particularly answer that question for your specific compliance metric that you're measuring against. It also depends what type of compliance, right? We spoke about a regulatory requirement that was around time. So you need to perform a certain activity or take a certain decision within a specific time frame. So certainly running our simulation, we can see with our resources, are we hitting that time frame or not? You could also, for instance, project if we continue increasing the number of claims that come through, like we could run that model with more claims in the same time period, fewer resources or same amount of resources. You could see like what's that break even point going to be for hitting an issue. But in like I guess what I'm trying to say is there are lots of different compliance metrics, so it really depends on the metric. But answering the fundamental question of, can I meet this with my current resources or with my current expenditure, or do I need to invest more to meet it, is absolutely in the sweet spot of simulation to answer.
Just a quick time check here. We are at time, so if you need to wrap up, please feel free to hop off. But Max and I are around for a little bit, so I think we'll just keep answering questions for a little bit here.
Okay. Yeah, again, for anyone that does have to drop, thank you so much for joining. We seriously appreciate you taking time out of your days. We hope you're as excited as we are. And we'll be in touch or reach out. We'll get you start using simulation. can you track the number of transactions that require forms versus those that don't need them? I'm not sure that I fully understand the question.
Yeah, I don't know that I fully understand it either. What I will say though is that we do support modeling the business in very complex ways. So if you one of the things that we allow is an injection of variables in the simulation. So if you can identify a process step that maybe has forms sometimes and doesn't have forms other times, and you have a way of identifying which it's which, then yeah, you can inject a variable that then is tracking the number of transactions that have forms versus not. But you would need a way to identify that and how you've modeled the process.
Awesome, thank you. We have a question about, would you recommend modeling all of your processes before exploring simulation, or could you do this in parallel? You are going to need to model the process in some capacity before you can simulate it. You need that model for the simulation to work. So you couldn't do them strictly in parallel. You would need to do the modeling first. But in terms of should you model all of your processes before exploring simulation, I would say the answer is no. You could model one process and simulate that process, get some results, generate ROI, present to your budget holders about making a particular investment. And that's actually what we would recommend. We see that the companies that are the most successful are ones that start small, like tackle a specific problem or a specific process, do all the analysis, model it, mine it, run simulations on how you can improve it, and then like actually improve it. So you can say, okay, you build credibility with the organization and with the budget holders that these investments work. Your program works, particularly if you're in like a centralized process excellence type function. So I would say, yeah, definitely like go end to end with one use case and then leverage the success there to help expand to multiple processes. But for that process, you do need the model before you simulate.
Yeah, I'll also note that typically a simulation model is a little bit more extensive than just a normal process model. So the process diagram that you might have, let's say as your head of claims, your normal day-to-day model that you've built together for your team, you're probably going to add a few more steps for your simulation model to really make it just a little bit more comprehensive, to dial the numbers in a little bit more. So there is a little bit of what are your business objectives and in terms of answering this question, but absolutely get started, like dig in, right? Find the projects that have the biggest ROI and tackle this.
There's a quick one here that I'm going to say how is iGrafx simulation better than Monte Carlo? We use discrete event simulation. That it's a conversation that probably is more deep than we have time to discuss here, but if you do some research on discrete event simulation versus Monte Carlo, you can get those answers. The short of it is, because we're simulating processes and we're using time series data, the discrete event simulation is more accurate. It's going to give you better results for these types of simulations. But there is a much deeper conversation to be had.
Yeah, in particular, it's as you are projecting forwards further and making more changes in your diagram. That's where Monte Carlo can get a baseline together in a model. It's when you make changes and you're projecting that's where it gets more valuable for you.
Have a question about recovery plans, business continuity. Absolutely. You could simulate what happens if this step takes longer or is not there for a specified period of time. So if you're trying to understand, what is the overall impact if this system goes down, that's something that you could simulate. Samuel, I'm not sure if you know this one. Is IDEF 0 modeling supported?
So not specifically. We don't sit here and say this is we look through the standard and say, yep, we have all the moving pieces identified for this. What I would say is we've characteristically had a number of defense contractors using the tool successfully. So we generally allow people to model, and then the simulation engine sits on top of that, right? So what I think would be more meaningful is to get into a little bit more of a conversation around exactly what you're trying to accomplish and make sure that we can actually meet your needs.
Okay, excellent. And we are 5 minutes past, so I think there are two questions left, but we can get back to them after the session. So again, thank you so much, everyone, for being such a willing participant. This is great. We love the engagement. Obviously, Samuel's the product manager, so he loves hearing your feedback. Please reach out if you have needs. If we gave an answer that we don't have it yet, we'd love to talk to you about the use case, make sure it gets in our roadmap at some point. So thank you for your time, everyone. Samuel, thank you for joining. Thanks for giving us the demo. And stay safe and have a great week, everyone.